ain't going back. Not gonna buy into all that. Hey, hey, ain't gonna hide. Gonna let all the fears slide. Got mother nature is on my side. Got all of the loving.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the New Now. I'm Lorenzo from the New Agora, newagora.ca. I'm with Kingsley Dennis today. I just want to give everyone a quick reminder. We've been in print and publishing for 11, 12 years. Kingsley has been with us, even if he may not have known over the course of that time period. We've been sharing his articles and plenty more besides. And the reason I'm mentioning it is go to newagora.ca and to Kingsley Dennis's website. You'll find tons of good information, tons of good stuff, tons of good products and services and intelligent ways that we find that you can be alive if you so choose to do some of those actions. Hello, Kingsley. Welcome to our show.
Hi, Lorenzo. Thanks for the invitation, and thank you for sharing my work over the years, which I wasn't aware of, but cheers.
No, we appreciate it. We've given you links and credits and all of those things. And today we're going to discuss a huge topic, at least do one part, maybe more, it depends on where this goes. Freedom, truth, and illusion. Let's say we tackle what you feel is a good definition of freedom.
Well, a big question, and really, freedom, I would say, is awareness of our human nature, because freedom, I think, is something we've always assumed we've had, and it's only when it's taken away from you or is restrained then we realize that we were never really free to begin with, or freedom was an illusion that we had it. Because so I think freedom has to be awareness of who we are and what are our rights and of our human nature. And as I said, you don't realize you're in a prison until you see the prison bars. So, I think it's something we take for granted. And only in the last few years, when all the facade of this so-called freedom, just because you can jump on a plane and go on holiday, you think you're free. We thought we were free to say what we want until we realized in the last couple of years that censorship is actually monitored and surveyed and managed. So I think freedom is being beyond those constraints of external management. We are responsible for how we manage ourselves. And I think that's freedom, is that liberty to manage yourself.
Well, you mentioned human potential and, human nature. What would you say that would be? Because that's an interesting topic all on its own, human nature.
Well, I think even now, the question of what it means to be human, again, is coming to the fore because all these other external influences are coming in. And perhaps we're taking for granted what human nature means. And perhaps we don't realize that being human means that we have potential to keep on changing, keep on developing, keep on becoming. I often say that a human being is a human becoming. We're not a finished project yet, and it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to try and experiment in different ways because we're still learning what it means to move forward. And that's human nature, is to develop, try to understand how we develop in different ways. And again, if that potential to move forward is curtailed or restrained, or being managed to go in a certain direction, and then again we get in the whole topic of transhumanism, we realize that human nature is trying to be managed by external forces, whereas human nature should be an unfolding from internal potentials, latent potentials, because the human being has so many what we may call latent organs of perception, organs of cognition, of knowledge, of understanding. But if those latent organs don't get a chance to develop, unfold, expand, grow because of external constraints and management, then again, we have an artificial environment for human nature. So it's a larger topic, but that's in a nutshell, I would say.
Well, that's a great topic. Now, may I ask you what you believe those external influences are? That's another.
All these questions could be a show in itself.
Yes.
I think we're realizing now that human life comes under a kind of form of social management. And we've all known that from sociologists, and if you just look at society, we know that society has been managed. And generally, we've accepted that because we've been told or conditioned or programmed that we need a certain management to keep everything in order and coherent. So we need social laws and norms. You can't run amok and do everything. So we understand that society has some rules or norms or understandings. And we always kind of thought, well, that's okay, but it stops there. We didn't really understand that there's levels and levels of all these management. So we thought it was a kind of mini macro management, not meta macro management. Now we're becoming to understand that there are forms of social management which are on huge levels, on your community level, your national level, and even, to some extent, global level, of course. So, we're realizing that, we are like the Russian doll analogy. You have a doll nested within a doll, within a doll, within a doll. We're realizing that there's layers and layers and layers. And the more we take them away, the more we realize that, we have, again, all these forms trying to managers, and influencers. And of course, now we understand through technology that these forms of external influences are very, very interpenetrating. Not just propaganda from a billboard on the road or from your radio or TV advertising, but these subliminals in everywhere we go, and how they subtly kind of nudge your thinking patterns to steer you in a direction of thought. And now what we have is kind of digital nudging. And I'd recommend anybody to look up surveillance capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff, the professor. Surveillance capitalism realized that there's a digital nudging whereby all our movements online are being monitored, and then we get influences to nudge us to go in a certain direction, to visit certain sites, and to believe and think in a certain way, because we believe that the internet is another space of freedom. We don't realize that actually 50% of the content and more is created by bots and algorithms that are trying to influence how we think and our opinions and our mindsets by putting in information that is customized within our technological bubble. So, there's all these levels of meta, macro, micro management through external behaviors and through interpenetration on the way we think and our thought patterns. So it's really huge, Lorenzo.
It is, but let's say why? Why do you think they're going through or to such efforts to manage us literally from cradle to grave?
Because I would say the one wild card is humanity, human nature. It's a wild card because no matter how much that anybody would want to predict it, they can't. And also because we are the greatest window of opportunity for potential is through the human being, because we have those latent potentials, as I mentioned. So, of course, if you are trying to manage, let's say, the human population, because we are let's say, more or less the dominant self-conscious sentient species on the planet. There are other sentient species, but through self-consciousness, the way we manifest it, humanity are the dominant ones of how we put our self-consciousness forward on the planet. So we're being managed in order to, let's say, have control over the planet. Now, in times past, the management could be done in a kind of external physical way. If you scare people physically, or you have sovereignty over their body physically, you have control over them. So we know that when the so-called the kings and queens or monarchs or the republics were in power, they had control over us physically. So they'd say if you did anything wrong, they'd make you a public humiliation. They'd put you in the town square into stocks or hang you and have your hanging body as a warning for everybody else. And the word got around, you see, but they couldn't get into our minds. But way back in the past, that wasn't so important because we were we weren't so developed consciously in how we manifested our thoughts and our sense of self, let's say. Over time, of course, we've come to a point where we're much more sophisticated, we're much more in-depth in our thought patterns, our understanding, our expression of consciousness. So, of course, if they can manage us physically, they can put someone in prison for all their life, but they may not change their thinking patterns, you know? And there's been a case in point where people have been in prison for decades and they come out and they're still an icon or a martyr, you know? So, you know, the pinnacle, I suppose, of wanting to have control over the systems on the planet or control of in general, of the planet and how we operate on it, is to get into our minds. It's the kind of the holy grail of you know, controlling human nature. And that's why through technologies, they can now interpenetrate more and more through first conditioning, external conditioning and programming, and now through more technological means, as we've just kind of slightly touched upon, to try to steer and nudge our thinking patterns, our opinions, etc., because they know, you know, that's the last bastion, is to get inside our minds, our psyche, and to affect our consciousness. And so they're doing that now because we are, as I said, we are the wild card. And you're seeing across the planet now that, you know, these major governments are realizing that they have to tread carefully because there are protests, there are people rising up, and no matter how heavy the programming is, and it's very heavy right now, they still can't get to everybody. And you only need a portion of society to be a catalyst to spread a contagion in consciousness, because consciousness, ideas, and understanding is a contagion as much as any virus is. Of course. And maybe faster, because it spreads through thought waves. So it's social management on a total exclusive and inclusive way. But I think they fear human nature because they know that they can't ultimately control it or predict it, and they don't know which way we're going to turn. And that's to our advantage. We are incredibly creative and resourceful humans.
Well, let's say this. You've become hardened to the penetration effects of propaganda, right? You know, it doesn't work on you, you know, let's say. So what makes you different from the regular, you know, 90% of the people that are zombified and moving down the streets believing most of what they hear and are told?
Well, I mean, I'd like to say that I'm fairly resistant against propaganda. I would never say 100% because that leaves you open to complacency. I don't think anyone's 100%. And I try not to put myself any different from other people. Means whatever stage I've arrived at my understanding is possible for anybody. But you're right, you know, I want to say that this is a kind of egalitarian opportunity where we can all come to you know, our level of understanding. At the same time, though, there are a lot of zombies out there. So we have to recognize that as well, which is good because it gives it an opportunity of discernment to say that's a behavior which, you know, is a result of being unaware to certain propaganda. And if I can recognize that, at least I can kind of make a discernment to my own behavior. And I think what it is, the state that I've arrived at is just many, many years of trying to decondition myself, is to peeling off the layers of conditioning. Now, many people say that if you want to, you know, if you want to develop yourself or develop your understanding, you do this and you do that, and there's all these steps, and there's many traditions or pathways or religious, spiritual pathways, etc. I came to the understanding, I think in my early 20s, that if you jump on a pathway of, let's say, development or something, and if you put all these steps on top of where you are, if your foundation is fundamentally corrupt, i.e., you still are heavy with the propaganda and conditioning, anything you put on top of you is built on a faulty foundation. I think, as the parable says, you know, you build your house on sand, at one point it's going to collapse, no matter if it's a luxurious, you know, penthouse, it's going to collapse if your foundation is not good. So I made a point of trying to start by going back to the basics, by deconditioning as much as possible myself, looking at what is conditioning me, what are the programs out there, what are these social cultural influences, why do I think the way I do at a young age? Because we can say like, I believe in this thoroughly. Okay? This is my belief system, and it's my sovereign belief system that I've come to it through my own understanding. Okay, but if you were born in a different part of the world under a different political or religious environment, would you think the same then? Probably not. You see, so we automatically say, I have this sovereign belief system, but we need to look at why do we have those beliefs? Where do they come from? And are they attached to our personality and our culture and our environment, or are they part of our essential self? So if we can get to what's our more essential and strip away what's part of the personality, we have a better start in life, or a better foundation. So that's what I did to try to arrive to where I am now.
Was there a catalyst moment or three that woke you to this perspective of exploration of your inner world?
Well, I wouldn't say there's one catalyst moment. I think when I was in my youth, let's say around 18, 19, 20, I came across the work of Gurdjieff. And you may be aware of that, and some of your listeners perhaps as well. And I think that helped me a lot because, Gurdjieff, I've looked at other stuff when I was younger, as you often do. But when I came across Gurdjieff, it was like, boom, this stuff was really, really for me fresh, and really kind of stripped things down by saying, you are asleep, humankind is asleep, you've got all these different personalities and eyes, you are operating automatically. So I thought, well, actually, he's got a point. So, if he's got a point, then what do I do about it? So that was, I suppose, when I was 18, 19, was the first probably big blow, because a lot of material that we come to, especially what we may call inner development material, it can be very kind of, soft and cushy and, kind of, rocks you in a boat like a baby. But really, we need the shocks. It's the shocks that help us rather than the cushy stuff. And I think also that's the same with external life circumstances, which is happening now in the world. Often we need the shocks to be of real benefit. And they may seem a little uncomfortable at the time, but they actually perhaps can benefit more than kind of, soft handling, pussyfooting around.
For sure. So, we discussed at the beginning, we're going to look at truths and illusions. Let's say, how would you separate? Because truth is a very tricky, interesting slope. And for me, it's changed from, as you say, from 18 to 28 to 38 to 48. Things have, my truths have altered as I have, as my perspectives have changed on life and my experiences. What would you say perhaps has weighed on one side or the other for truths and illusions? Like how would you define them, if at all?
Well, I would say that first we have to get a grasp on what we understand about our reality, because reality is like the framework where we have these understandings of truth and illusion. And I came to the way I frame it, and again, it's very careful. We have to use language carefully and definitions because they frame our cognitive models. So I come to see this reality we are in as a lesser reality. And that's why, the recent collection of essays I put out are called Notes from a Lesser Reality. So if we that means actually there's a greater reality, which is good. It's good news that there's a greater reality, but it exists beyond our perceptive realm at this moment. We are in the lesser reality. So the truths we're dealing with are lesser truths. They can still be important for us, and they can still be truths for us, but they are not with a capital T as in objective, let's say universal truth so much, but they're truths for our reality. So if you can see they're lesser truths, there's a quote I remember, I think it's from Idris Shah. He said, the world is an illusion, but there are still truths within it. And I think that's a good way to frame it, because there's still interventions of truth, but there may be in this reality lesser truths reflecting greater truths. So illusion really is more or less the facade of this reality. But of course, it's because it's not the greater truth, it's an illusion. But it reflects that there is a greater cognition, a greater perceptive understanding. And so really, this reality is a gradation of different levels of illusions. And some of those illusions are closer to the truth and some are further away. So let's make the analogy of a theater. You're watching a play and you have the front end of the stage where the actors come on and they do their theater. And then you get some actors maybe at the back end of the stage, and they are maybe lesser actors or something. And then you get the curtain, and then you get all the activity behind the curtain. And you get these people who are responsible for putting the play on, all the stage hands and everyone who are operating the lighting. They're important because they create the structure for the theater. But the front end of the theater is what we immediately see. The spectacle, the facade, what I call the theater of the absurd. And we get all this facade in life, entertainment, media, spectacle. And we don't realize that you get different parts of the stage, front stage, backstage, then you get behind the curtain. All these are, for me, levels of illusion. And so reality is really, the lesser reality is a presentation of different states of illusion. Some are closer to truth and some are further away. And the ones that are further away are the ones that are manufactured by our social cultural systems and our institutions. Like I say, the media, the politics, and all the major institutions, they propagate these greater illusions. And the more that we can penetrate through, let's say, an inner discernment or inner awareness, I would say we get to a gradation where the illusion is less dense and it's closer to truth to us. So I don't know if that answers the question. There are gradations in everything.
Well, how would you describe the greater reality?
Well, the greater reality is what's beyond what may adhere to, let's say, cosmic laws. What may be the origin for materiality? Because we are living, again, it's all a matter of perspective. When someone says it's a matter of perspective, that can cover everything from left field to right field. So when I say that, I mean, if you think, if your perspective, and this is the dominant, let's say, dominant consensus narrative, is that life is generally an accident that occurred on this planet. Some kind of DNA brought out of these sulfur pools on a dead rock that's hurtling through empty space, and we're an accident, and there's no kind of reason for life, and there's perhaps no life in the universe, and when you're dead, you're dead. That's the consensus narrative, and I think most thinking people have realized that that's poppycock, to put it blindly or put it diplomatically. Actually, I haven't used that word for years. I don't know why I said poppycock. Just occurred to me, but anyway, it's rubbish. And so we know that there is much deeper understandings to why there is life.